Hey, it's Kathleen Rumford from Catalytic, and I just want to welcome you here to this interview. And so excited about this. We have Lisa Relag here with us. Good morning, Lisa.
Hi.
And just a brief bio on Lisa. She's an independent educational consultant and the owner of Admissions Decrypted, where she works directly with high school students and their families to guide them through the college search and application process. She's a veteran homeschooler with nearly 2 decades experience homeschooling in several states as well as overseas. She earned a bachelor's degree in English from the U.S. Naval Academy, has a master's in education, and a graduate certificate in independent educational consulting. She also volunteered for 17 years as an admissions liaison for the Naval Academy. Her goal when working with students and parents is to bring calm, clarity, and practicality to college admissions, which I know we will all benefit from right now and in the future. So thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having
Yeah,
me.
yeah. Thanks for agreeing to share your wisdom with us and experience with us. But real briefly, what's your role as an educational consultant? Because there are many educational consultants out there, and not all of them deal with college admissions and helping students in high school and getting into college. So, what is your role? What do you do as an educational consultant?
That's a great question. So, what an independent educational consultant does is work directly with the high school family and help them through the college admissions process. So, I don't work for a boarding school or for a private school. And I am also not getting money from a college for placement. So, that would be like an agent that would be recruiting someone. My role really is to help the family through the process and keep their best interests in mind. So, um, what I do is it's a very student-centric process. I start typically with sophomores or juniors, and I help them to figure out what they want out of life. What are their career goals? What interests them? Where are they finding a lot of joy and satisfaction right now?
Yeah.
What areas do they need assistance in? And then we try to mock up what an ideal college might look like for them. No names yet, but what qualities would that ideal place have? Is it urban, suburban? Is it rural? Is it a really big state school with a thriving sports culture? Or is it a small liberal arts college where they're going to be one of maybe 2,000 students in small classes? And once we've done sort of that role modeling of what the ideal looks like, then we start the college list exploration process to try to put names to that list of what colleges would have those fit items for them.
Hmm.
And it's a give and take. I don't have a day where here is your list. Yay, verily, this is what you're applying to. But it's a real back and forth thing of, well, have you thought about this? You've said this is important to you, but it also seems to be in contrast with this other factor you've said is important. Where do you think you are with that? Is one a deal breaker? Are you a little bit flexible with one? When you say you want let's say a traditional college, what's that mean for you? When you say you want something that is supportive of some feature of your identity, what would that look like? What are you hoping to find at a college in order to support that aspect of either your goals or who you are as a person?
Hmm.
And then the next thing that I do is we start working through the actual application process. In most cases, that process spans the summer between junior and senior year into a little bit of senior year. I like to help students be ready to meet the deadlines for early applications, whether that's an early decision or an early action deadline or a priority deadline for scholarships or honors college consideration. And if they are ready to meet those deadlines that typically fall around November 1st, then hitting regular decision deadlines for any other schools is really easy to do as well.
Right.
Then it's a waiting game. So that's
Yes.
where a lot of my students are right now, my current seniors, is they are waiting. They have a few admissions results already, but they're waiting through January, February. In some cases, I have one regular decision college that won't report back until the 1st of April.
Yeah.
And then senior year by May 1st, they make their admissions decision, deciding where they're going to. And always one of my goals is that I want students to have some choice at the end. So not I don't want it to be a situation where come March, April of senior year, they have one school and only one school that's admitted them, but they're weighing this type of college with an honors program versus another college that might be smaller but very intimate versus one that is giving them a lot of financial aid. So they're
Hmm.
kind of deciding, even at the end, what makes the most sense for them.
This is really fascinating to me because there's a lot there, and there's a component of coaching in there where you're actually
Absolutely.
coaching someone because you're going to have students who are very self-confident, maybe even have leadership skills, but then you're gonna have those who probably like I was, like, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was 17, I was really smart, but I had no idea. I didn't have any passions. I was good at everything, or not say everything, but good at a lot of things, but I wasn't great. So I didn't have a real keen direction. I would have loved to have sat down with someone like you in sophomore year to start the process of who am I,
Yes.
who and what do I want, and because I'm honestly, it's been a struggle all my life. It's like, what do I want? I can do a lot of things, I'm good at a lot of things, but going into a place where you may never have been before with your own being, and what is important to me besides what everyone else has told me it should
Yes.
be important to me. I
With my
love that.
sophomores and my early juniors, I spend a lot of time on things like interest surveys, Strong's interest survey, the Holland codes, looking at what features a certain job might have. Okay, you say you're interested in, you want to do med. Why do you want to do medicine? What are you thinking that looks like? Or, a great example was a student I worked with a few years ago who had an interest in physical therapy, but also didn't love school. And so as we're going through this process, it was, all right, you're looking at a career goal that involves about 7 years of college. Is that really where your interest is? Because you're saying you're really excited about finishing high school and a little ambivalent about college. And what we finally developed was that probably physical therapy assistant was a better match for her. It was a 2-year community college licensure program. And that gave her a lot of options because the umbrella organization that does licensure and accreditation of programs accredits every program in the US. So
Hmm.
you can do a real apples to apples comparison across those programs.
Hmm.
And that was a good match for her because it met her interests of a medical setting, hands-on work that helped people, that had that positive feedback of helping people achieve their goals. So all those little wickets she was looking for, but it didn't mean 7 years of college and calculus and a competitive application process towards the end of her undergraduate. It was a
Yeah.
much more direct entry type program for her.
Right. Which then gives her the option that if she's just on fire for it, when she's in there and working, then her passion could spur her on to go further if
There
she
are,
wanted to.
yeah, there's definitely some ways of doing that. It also fit her goals of mobility. It was a profession that she could move around quite a bit. It had a relatively good income value for the amount of money that she would be spending for the degree. So I think that was a good answer for her.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Wow. Okay. So thank you for that, because I'm sure that's going to give people a lot to think about in terms of, how could they maybe work with you or someone in this area, or things they can even think about themselves with their students. Um, and we'll touch more about that at the end. But so for parents of students in seventh, eighth, and maybe even ninth, what can they be doing now? So let's jump back into kind of like high school, pre-high school, high school. Like, what can they be doing to set themselves up and their students up for a strong high school career and potential college, now in seventh, eighth, early ninth grades?
So the first thing I'd say is I'm really glad that they're asking that question now, because I do think this is a bit of a lengthy process and you're going to learn some things and it will take some time to percolate through your head and come to a moment of rest with what the implication for your family situation is. Um, so the first thing that I would say is hold doors open academically. I think sometimes there's a rush to label our kids, perhaps more so in a traditional school setting, but even in homeschool settings, I see this where we're saying, my student's not good at writing. Oh, that he's not a math kid. And I would say keep pushing the envelope where they are and a little bit more, where they are and a little bit more. Recognize that a lot of these skills are things that develop through persistence, not from magical gifting.
Yeah.
It's a long slog. Um, so math, science, and writing, those are the areas where I think real persistence pays off. Keep at it. Don't be quick to label, oh, he's never going to need that. She's not going to need that, because you do close doors. The second item I would say is take some time to learn what college costs right now.
Mm.
The costs are not what they were 30 years ago. So when I was growing up in the 1980s and looking at college, it was something that a middle class family might have been able to pay for out of income, or that a student might have been able to pay for most of it through a summer job. It's really not available to most students anymore. And it can be really shocking. So what I would recommend is to go to what is called an EFC calculator. Big Future, which is a website run by the College Board, the same group that does the SAT, has one of these, and it will simulate what your family's expected contribution would be after doing the FAFSA. The FAFSA is the federal government financial aid form.
Right.
Um, I, to be really honest, the first time I ran one of these, I was in shock.
Hmm.
It was not a number that made sense to me. It wasn't a number that was going to be budgetable out of our current income.
Yeah.
And I think that there is some awareness of that that needs to happen, because every single college is not going to be payable by every family out of pocket. And you need to know that going in. The next step would be to run some net price calculators. So this is something that colleges are required to have on their websites. It's relatively new. Probably in the last 8 years, the federal government has required these. Some are higher quality than others, but it will basically take the total cost of attendance for a school, and then it will deduct or show for a family of your composition and average income. And in some cases, it'll take into consideration the student's GPA and test scores. It'll give you an idea of what the net price for your student would be. Realizing if your student is in 7th grade, you have a lot of years between now and then. Prices do change at schools. So you're getting an idea. You're not getting a guarantee.
Right.
But college prices have a lot in common with buying a house or buying a car. There's the sticker price, and then there's the bottom line price, and they may not be the same in every instance. The next thing that I would do is I would start spending time learning what your resources are in your state or area. If you're a military family, do you have a transfer GI Bill benefit? If you live in a state with a good state college program, what options do you have there? Some in-state programs are phenomenal values. Some states have merit scholarships, like Georgia has the Hope and Zell Miller Scholarship. Florida has the Bright Futures Scholarship. In some cases, they're tied to test scores. It might have a service requirement where you have to rack up a certain number of service hours to be eligible. So know what those options are and what boxes would have to be checked to be eligible for that. And then I think it's good to start doing some reading. You don't need to be reading hours and hours every day like I do, but do start reading a few books. One that's really new that I recommend is called Who Gets In and Why by Jeff Salingo. He used to edit the Chronicle of Higher Education. He had his first journalism job working on the US News and World Report ranking system in the 1980s. So he's got a real depth of knowledge. And
Yeah.
to write this book, he embedded with 3 different admissions offices. So he's really got an insider view of how the sausage gets made in admissions. And I think um, countering some of the things we think are true with some actual truth is really helpful. Don't rely on the neighborhood chit chat. What you hear standing around the pool deck may be truthy, but it may not apply to your situation. The same goes for social media. I find a lot of families who have read a headline of something on social media and they've taken it as a categorical truth instead of recognizing it applies in a very specific situation that isn't one that their family shares. So that's a lot of learning. It's a long process. Go ahead and dig a little deeper. Don't take just those headlines. The third thing I would encourage is to help your student figure out what is of interest to them and really dig into those areas. Help them to find ways of making deeper connections. That could be summer programs, it could be internships or job shadowing. It might be directed reading. If you have a student who's interested in, say, archaeology, do you have someone who in your social network who has some experience that could do a little bit of a book chat time with them occasionally? Is there an independent project that they could pursue? Scout programs, 4-H, the Congressional Award, those are things that can be of value and help a student really dig into things that they find interesting. I would also say that in some cases, homeschoolers may need to create or personally be involved with driving forward some of these activities. So if you are working outside the structure of what a public school or private school has, where there is a robotics team that's been active for 10 years, you may need to be building some analog to that yourself and finding 3 or 4 people to come into it with you.
Mhm.
And that can be really rewarding. I've had students who started Model UN clubs. I've had students who've been involved in parent organized science Olympiad programs or cybersecurity team programs. But it often requires a parent to say, yes, I'll sign the bottom line, I'll collect the money, I'll send in the registration, and I may not be a subject matter expert, but I will help the students figure out what they're doing.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I think that parents should be doing is starting a habit now of documenting what you're doing and what you have done. So that's transcripts, course descriptions. It might be as basic right now with those 7th, 8th graders as an activities list or starting them on a very rudimentary resume. What are the things you spend your time doing? When you are in 11th, 12th grade and you're writing up a CV or an activities list, there may be some threads that are not easily detectable if you haven't tracked things over time. Let me, an example, I had a student who actually just graduated with a computer science degree. And part of his application, he demonstrated a continuing interest in computer science, not only by taking an advanced placement CS class, but also by being in a Cyber Patriot cybersecurity team, and also doing camps over the summer that were offered by the NSA in cybersecurity. So these were discrete little events until you put them all together. And if you're not tracking what you do over time, it's easy to lose, oh, there was that weekend thing, because it's just a weekend thing. It's hiding in your calendar that's in a drawer or in the trash. So I recommend documenting that. Reading lists can be helpful, especially if you're more on the unschooler side of things. Keeping a reading list can help you track what you're doing over time. And then if you have someone who's in the performing arts, starting to keep a music performance list or a works performed list can be something that when you get to the audition or pre-audition stage, colleges might be interested in.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. I was just thinking through for example, the computer science example you gave. Right. So when a college admissions person sees not just SAT scores and grades, but then they see, oh, there's continuing interest and focus and dedication into computer sciencey kind of things, the cybersecurity or
Yeah,
the camps. You're seeing that there's real interest there,
exactly. Yes.
yeah,
And it doesn't always come in a packaged long form engagement
right,
from one single source. I'll give another example would be a film student that I worked with for a while, and her activity with film started with a National History Day project that she did a video for. And as she progressed through, here's a semester long program for women in film, and then here's a week long film camp, and then I put in a film to this contest and won it, and then I spoke at the Book and Music Festival. So all these things individually just could have looked like small discrete events. Taken as a timeline, they showed really an intense passion in filmmaking and a lot of depth and maturing over time.
right. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And the same, I guess, would be true with employment, where
Yes.
someone is employed and then maybe either moving up or they're just staying long term into something, showing that they've got focus and that kind of.
Or even they're having jobs of different complexity and responsibility over time as they get older.
Yeah,
Maybe they started picking strawberries, like was my first summer job, and moved on to something like working at a grocery store and then working in an office. It wouldn't necessarily have to
okay,
be increasing responsibility within the same organization, but you could demonstrate increasing responsibility in the work history.
right, okay, good, awesome. Wow, that's a lot. That's stuff that the students can. Well, I mean, it's a lot in terms of a lot to take in. I think as a parent, and things that I wish I had known early on. Um, but like you're saying, seventh to ninth graders can be looking into these kinds of things. But then obviously in your 10th, 11th, 12th, you're hopefully building on some of the things
Yeah,
that you.
I think almost everything that we talked about would be true of an older student as well.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Um, Something that came up for me in there was, especially when you were talking about college costs, I'm not, you're probably going to talk about this, but just the community college would be another area to maybe even look at the college cost for that, and factor that in. Yeah.
I am a huge fan of community college, but I think it's one where people can make assumptions about what's possible and extrapolate that it's going to work in their situation. Let's go back to the physical therapy assistant example we talked about earlier. So, someone who has an associate of applied science in physical therapy, most of their coursework will be very hands on. They'll be taking some anatomy and physiology classes. They're also doing things like massage classes and classes about manipulations. Those don't necessarily have a, a transfer course in a bachelor's program that's an equivalent class. So even though they have an associate's degree from a 2-year college, they may not be more than a semester or two towards completing a 4-year degree. Another example, I think you and I are both in Virginia. There is something which I love called guaranteed admissions agreements between Virginia Community College System and all of the public 4-year colleges in Virginia. So a student can attend one of the community colleges in the state. And if they meet a certain set of requirements, they have a guaranteed admission to a school like UVA or Virginia Tech or Christopher Newport. The fine print of that is the requirements for Virginia Tech and University of Virginia aren't identical. And if you want to go to University of Virginia, the requirements to go to the College of Engineering or transfer to the College of Arts and Sciences aren't identical. So a student who wanted to do that either needs to have their first choice, I'm on track to transfer to this one particular school, and every academic course choice I make at the community college is bent towards that, or they have a field of, well, there's 2 to 4 schools I'm interested in going to, how do I pick and choose so that I am most eligible to hit the guaranteed admission to each of them? And
Yeah,
it gets complicated.
yeah,
It's more complicated if you also at the same time want to hold a door open to being a transfer student out of state. So that's, I love transferring. I love having students do dual enrollment classes, but I think there are definite assumptions that people make that aren't based in a deep understanding of how the programs are connected.
yeah. And you bring up a good point too. Even if you do get guaranteed admissions into the college, it doesn't necessarily mean you are going to get admitted into the School of Engineering, correct?
Right.
Because
Well, so in that example, University of Virginia has a separate agreement for College of Engineering than for College of Arts and Sciences. Now, what it would mean is if you are admitted, you might be guaranteed admission to College of Arts and Sciences. You might not be guaranteed the ability to declare, say, biology. So that's the fine print that you have to be really aware of. Some programs are closed to transfer students because they're in such high demand.
yeah, yeah. So, I mean, I was amazed when I saw some of my friends' kids getting into, they were in like UVA, for example, or even JMU, James Madison University, I mean, different schools. But then you have to apply to get into, you're in there, you're getting your gen eds, you're already in the college, but then you have to apply to get into the School of Economics program or the
Mhm.
business school part. I mean, and then nursing at Liberty, or I mean, you have already been there for a year, maybe 2 years, and getting to be there for 2 years, and you're now having to apply to get into this program within the school.
You can also have circumstances where a program is direct entry only. Nursing is a good example of that. So some colleges, you can only enter the nursing program, which is very restricted in capacity because of the clinical rotations. You can only enter from high school or as a new student. Other colleges will let you transfer into it as a freshman or as a sophomore. Other colleges require you to start and do a year or two before starting the nursing program. So it just really depends on what that college's requirements are.
It's so important for parents to grasp what you're saying, because my daughter, we were doing and it's going towards an associate's, and after her third semester, I started looking at what she was going to go to Virginia Commonwealth University. She wanted to go into the art program, and to get in there, there were things that she had to do there. Yes, she could have done them at the community college, and we were going that route to finish up an associate's. But then when I realized, well, wait a second, she's going to have to take some of these at VCU anyway. Why
Mhm.
duplicate and pay for the classes at the community college and then have to take them again? And so what we ended up doing was she ended up going in as a transfer student, not a guaranteed, not having met the requirements for guaranteed admissions, but going in as a transfer student, and went in earlier than we had thought she would,
Mhm.
because she otherwise would have been duplicating some of the courses. So you
Or
do need to
there's,
investigate.
yeah, there's also circumstances where they might have requirements to meet the associate's degree that don't then meet the end bachelor's degree requirements. An example of that is the Associate of Science and Engineering from NOVA, which is Northern Virginia Community College. There is a very smooth transfer process to then go to George Mason University. But the NOVA courses to get the associate's degree, it includes some things like engineering drafting, which is a phenomenal class, but there is no requirement for engineering drafting in a mechanical engineering degree from George Mason. So would the student learn something really great that would be of value to them as an engineer? Perhaps, but it's also a course that you're paying for that isn't meeting a bachelor's degree requirement.
Yeah.
So, you know, I do believe that learning is really important, and I've learned a lot of things that there wasn't a direct immediate payoff for, but there was some long-term value to. But also I realized that you need to pick and choose. Sometimes earning the associate's degree is a credential, but it doesn't move you forward as far as you thought it might.
Right. Yeah. I just think that there's a lot like the going in and doing some of the research as a parent into some of this ahead of time is really, really helpful. And, being a planner, like I am, I even was late in the game and picking
Mhm.
some of this stuff up. So I just think this is so valuable for parents to start getting a clue as to some of the things that we're talking about here that are different from maybe when they went to school, because things aren't always the same. Andrew coming in now as a parent, mindset than as a student mindset. So
Yes. So let me throw out a tip. I didn't put this in my 7th, ninth grade suggestions, but it's a tip I like to encourage all of my students and families to do. And that's to start following colleges on social media.
mm,
So I'm of the generation where I'm Facebook heavy. It could be Instagram for you. It might be maybe even Twitter. Pick some colleges. I am a big fan of the feed Colleges That Change Lives. That's about 44 liberal arts colleges, but I also follow Northern Virginia Community College. I follow a number of the Virginia public universities, service academies, um, ROTC scholarship pages. And the reason that I do that is I can't know to research things I don't know exist.
right.
Um, George Mason and Northern Virginia Community College have a program called Advance, which is a transfer program, but even more than that, it's actually concurrent enrollment. So students are enrolled at both colleges. They have a student ID for both colleges. They can use the library at both, the fitness facilities at both. You can go and get the free student tickets for performances at George Mason when we're back to seeing live performances, and the student starts taking classes at the community college, and then there is this gradual process where then they start picking them up at George Mason, and then they transfer completely to George Mason. And they're really promoting this in areas like hospitality, some of the business administration, and the computer science program. And what I'm really excited about is a new cloud computing program that they're doing, where Amazon, which is one of the largest cloud computing um, companies in the world and is moving their second headquarters to this area, is helping to design that curriculum. And it's one where the student can start out at the community college a little bit smaller, um, often smaller class sizes, and definitely a smaller tuition bill. So I
Yeah,
think that's a really powerful thing, but I would never have known that existed if I hadn't been following the social media account.
exactly. So one of the other things that came up for me when you were talking about the 7th to ninth grade and just even throughout high school was how parents and students can be looking for opportunities to really enrich their time during high school.
Mhm.
And I know for us, when we were looking at camps and things like that, my daughter took a camp, an architecture camp at Virginia Tech. And by the time I found out about it, she was already going to be going into her senior year. So she only had that one last summer to take it, and it was competitive to get into, and she did get into the camp. But you can be looking for these kinds of things throughout their high school time. And some people say, well, I just want to get them through high school quickly and I want to get into college. But don't be so fast in trying to get out of high school, because there's opportunities that only high
Mhm.
schoolers can take or do that you can't once you're a senior. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah, there's
yeah,
a lot of fields where they want to promote student interest and growth and development. But once that high school graduation hits, then the focus goes on to helping people through internships who are college students. But it may not help a student get into the college program if they didn't have those exposures in high school.
yeah,
So let me bounce off of that for a minute, because there is also a little warning to give.
okay.
And I think this goes for any parent. It's a parent fallacy, but homeschoolers, I think maybe it's just because I was hanging around with a lot of homeschoolers when my kids were younger. I saw this happening. So you see a family and their kid is in the youth orchestra, and you have another friend and their kid's really involved in volleyball, and you have another kid and that kid is doing multiple robotics competitions, and there's another student and they're heavy into debate and creative writing, and you think, oh my gosh, I need a violin playing, volleyball playing, robotics debater. And you can't do all of those.
Right.
We only get gifted 24 hours a day, and real accomplishment in areas are, again, the result of persistence and time investment. And you can't be spending the same multiple hours a day practicing violin if you're also turning a wrench on a robot or also working on a creative writing project. So you can have some well-roundedness, but there's also going to be things that slip. There was a point with one of my own kids where we dropped Latin, and that was after his older brothers had done 3 years and 4 years respectively. And for this particular kid, getting two was just all she wrote. So I hope he goes on to do a modern language in college, but it came a decision of, do we keep going with this rigorous Latin program, or do I make sure that you have the math and physics that is going to support your interest in engineering? And once I phrased it that way, I realized that math and science was the deal breaker for him. It had
Right.
to happen. And
Yeah.
no one was going to accept him into an engineering program just because he had that third year of Latin.
Right.
So,
Yes. So good point. There are a lot of opportunities and a lot of things out there. So don't get overwhelmed to think that you've got to do them all.
right.
But just don't think, just adjust for the awareness that there are things out there. I don't want people to miss that. And as early on as you can start just talking to your student about what they're interested in and what opportunities there are for them, you can start taking
And a
advantage.
lot of the programs do happen every year. So the Gen Cyber Camp that NSA runs nearly every year. So if you hear about it and your kids, let's even go younger, a fourth, fifth, sixth grader, maybe start yourself a document of, hey, this is a thing that happens at this college nearly every summer, or this camp occurs, or there's a special merit badge day that is a really neat one, but the registration is going to fill up in 2 hours and it only happens on one day in January.
Yeah.
So if you can recognize those opportunities are out there, you can be prepared for them when they come up.
Right. And like you said, Facebook groups, it doesn't even necessarily, looking at the high school or the college ones is great also, but we've got just a plethora of homeschool Facebook groups where you can say, hey, my child's interested in this, this, and this. What kind of opportunities are out there?
Mhm.
And parents who have already had their kids through different programs can just let you know about opportunities. So that's a beautiful thing as well. So can homeschoolers, this is one of the questions that I think is out there a lot, is can homeschoolers get into mainstream colleges like popular state universities or selective colleges? Can homeschoolers even do that?
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Every year, there's a lot of homeschoolers that are admitted to the whole gamut of colleges, from the selective liberal arts colleges to the big flagship public universities to everything in between. So I think at the moment, there are very few colleges that are concerned about the validity of homeschooling. But I think also homeschooling is a neutral now. So it's not a silver bullet, it's not a stumbling block. A student is still going to need to demonstrate their academic readiness.
Mhm.
And if you're looking at colleges that are on the more selective end, and I may have used that phrase a couple times already, what I mean by that, a college is selective if they admit fewer than half of the students who apply. And then highly selective as you go into maybe a 30% admissions rate. Most selective, you're talking about colleges that are admitting 15% or fewer of the students who apply. And it's important with that to recognize that the majority of students who are turned down or denied are very, very well qualified. There was an admissions officer, I think from Harvard several years ago, who said they could fill the entire class, set it aside, fill the entire class, set it aside, fill the entire class with the third tranche down, and there would be no discernible difference in quality from the first to the third class. So it really does come down to a lot of factors in the most selective colleges that are beyond the student's control. So homeschoolers can be admitted to all kinds of universities, but they do need to realize that homeschooling is not a hook in and of itself. It's what they did with that time.
Yeah. So what do colleges look at when they review the applications?
So let me talk first what they look at in general, and then we'll talk a little bit about specific wickets that homeschoolers need to be aware of. So for decades, there's been a consistent trend that persists that the main thing that colleges base admissions decisions on are grades, the courses taken, and then test results. And the test results they look at are the SAT and the ACT primarily. With grades, they're looking at grades in the context of the strength of the curriculum. Were they taking the core courses that they needed? Core courses would be math, science, English, and history or social studies. That last one would include government and economics. They're also typically looking for a couple foreign language credits, so 2 to 4 years in the same foreign language. And when I talk about the context of the strength of the curriculum, what that means is the college is going to try to discern, was this a regular level, high school level course? Was it honors? Was it advanced placement or dual enrollment or international baccalaureate if the high school offers that? Was it something that demanded more? And they're going to give a little extra boost, consider with extra value, the classes that required more. Sometimes they will use class rank as a way of getting that additional context. For homeschoolers, class rank isn't a real meaningful number. All of my individual kids are one of one.
Right.
Then there's a second set of criteria that colleges can consider, because there is a little bit of a fallacy that what happens with college admissions is that there's some numerical value that the college places on the student, and they rack and stack everybody, and then they take the student with the highest combined GPA and test score, and then the second highest and the third highest until the class is full. That's really false. That's not what happens. They are turning down students with perfect SATs. They are turning down students who have 4.0s at these most selective colleges. They might be taking the student who's 10th, 20th in the class, who doesn't have a perfect GPA, but tried some things that were adventurous and challenging. So the college will be looking for elements about the student's personal characteristics. What's important to them? What has their life experience and academic experience been beyond just the thing they got sitting in a classroom? So the way that they will measure that is they'll be reading the essays that the student writes, letters of recommendation that are submitted on their behalf. They'll look at the extracurricular activities and what they did with those. And activities can include things like family responsibilities and work. If there's an older family member that lives with you that the student has some responsibility for. If they maybe are driving a younger sibling to and from some activity, that's something that can be considered and weighed in an admissions decision. Some programs will consider portfolios. That's very commonly done within arts supplements or music performance majors, but it's also becoming popular even amongst things like potential engineering majors or say creative writing, where there's some body of work that you can submit. And then the final thing that some colleges will do will be interviews. So all of those can give an admissions board a more holistic view of what the students' qualities are and if they're a good fit for that college.
Mm-hmm.
A college may even weigh factors like demonstrated interest in the college or the family's need for financial aid. And let me spend just a moment on that last bit, because that may give some families pause. When a college is trying to create their class and they're filling an entire class, they're not only reviewing individual records. Often colleges will have an algorithm that they are needing to follow of, we expect about 20 to 30% of the students we admit to actually attend. So we need to send yeses out to 3 to 5% or 3 to 5 times the number of students we hope to actually have come. There is a cost in terms of financial aid to bringing that group of students in. So if the students you're looking at are high needs students financially, as a group, the college might not be able to afford that level of financial aid. So there is a back and forth at many colleges between the admissions office and the financial aid office as they are shaping the class at the end and determining exactly who is going to get an admissions yes or an admissions no. That's a little bit shocking. There are really only around 100 to 120 colleges that are need blind in the admissions process. And of those, not all of them meet full need for families. So they might be need blind in saying you are admitted, but that doesn't mean always that the college will meet the full financial need for the family. So that's back to the broad college list. Sometimes the student is going to have a better fit with a college where the student statistics are on the higher end for the college so that they can be admitted to the honors program at the school and be competitive for scholarships like the Gabelli Scholars Program at Boston College or a Stamps Scholarship. These are really prestigious and high value scholarships, but they're at colleges that the overall admissions rate isn't so selective. So that's a little bit of strategizing. If that's something that you wanted to read more about, I mentioned Who Gets In and Why earlier by Jeff Salengo, and he has a chapter towards the end of the book about shaping the class where he goes into depth in what that looks like. So
Yeah.
that would be, and I've written a little bit about it on my website as well, what that can look like. It's unfortunate, but at many colleges, they are dependent on tuition revenue for operating costs. So even if they idealistically would love to accept people without regard to the tuition they would pay, they're not necessarily in a position to be able to do that.
So do homeschoolers have extra requirements in terms of applications or applying?
So they can. And again, it's going to depend on the college that they're applying to. I think the general thing I would say is homeschoolers need to be prepared to give the admissions office reasons to say yes. And that can be a lot of items. It could be many different items. It doesn't always have to be test scores, but test scores could play a part when they're available. It could be items like doing an interview where for other students, the interview is optional. It might be required for homeschool students. They might ask for outside evidence of academic work. So that could be something like, I've seen the ACT meet that need because it has a science section. I've seen SAT subject tests meet that, or advanced placement, dual enrollment college credits. Some schools have started asking for a graded paper. So they want a long form example of the student writing, not something like a standardized test essay, which is at best a rough draft on a topic you've never considered before. But they want to see, what does the student writing look like when they've had time to consider it and rough draft it and polish it, and then what feedback did they get from their instructor. Sometimes they'll ask for science lab reports. Arizona State University is one that has this requirement for each lab science that you are putting on the transcript. They want to see some evidence of lab work. And so that is either filling out their form of the lab report for each class, or they'll take a few other items like subject tests or dual enrollment in lieu of that particular course. Something that is not necessary, and then I'm going to go back to what parents need to provide, but the GED is not a requirement. I just want to say that again. I've been associated with homeschooling for over 20 years. GEDs used to be something that people felt like they needed to take to verify what they did in the homeschool setting. And it's really not necessary anymore. I hardly ever run into a college that requires it. The couple times I have run into that, I have pushed back on admissions offices on it. Sometimes they will change the requirement or say, well, we'll accept it if you have it, but we won't require it. My personal advice is if you don't need to take the GED, don't. Because unfair as it is, there is a lingering stigma against the GED that it represents someone who didn't succeed in high school and was a non-completer. And that doesn't describe most homeschoolers. Um, if you're a homeschooler and doing the GED that's how you finished high school, then do it, turn it in, move on. But don't feel like you're doing high level academic work, but also need the GED to substantiate that because it's not a requirement in most cases. What the colleges are going to expect is that they get some of the same documentation that they would get from a traditional high school. And in most cases for a homeschooler, that's going to be the responsibility of the parent to create and submit. And that is at minimum a transcript. And the transcript's a 1 to 2 page document that gives a summary of the courses that were taken, when they were taken, how much credit they earned, and what the grade was. Many of them want to see what is essentially course descriptions. They don't all call it course descriptions. They might say, we want you to explain the content of each course and how grades were determined or assessed and the textbook that you used. Well, that's everything that goes in a course description. So, so back when we were talking about 7th to 9th graders, one of the suggestions was start roughing the transcript out, start writing your course descriptions now, polish them as you get closer, but write down now, what were those books you used for world history or for introduction to literature? Because it's a lot easier to write them as you go than to try to remember, oh, what was that thing that we did when we studied? 2 other things that I recommend my families produce is a school profile and the counselor recommendation form. So a school profile is something that a traditional high school would provide, typically about 2 pages long. It gives the area demographics, who attends the school, and sort of a laundry list of what's available at that school. It could have average test scores. It might have area income levels. It has percentages of graduates who go on to 2-year or 4-year college. So some of these categories aren't very applicable for a homeschool family, but it is useful to talk about why we homeschool, what our homeschool philosophy is, how we execute that. Maybe if the parents have some credentials of their own that are relevant, if they have advanced degrees, if they have a particular experience working in an area. If you've required your student to do some sort of service learning or a capstone project, that might be something that you explain. And then if there's educational partners that you've worked with, online curriculum providers, a co-op group, a special tutor, if your student's been dual enrolled, then a brief description of what those items are as part of the school profile as well. It gives the reader in the admissions office additional context to understand what you mean when you're writing about an English class or a history class or calculus. So the final item that I recommend the parents write is the counselor recommendation. This is something that you would provide directly to the college during the application process. And it is an opportunity for you to talk about the student characteristics as opposed to the school setting characteristics, which would be in the school profile. This is probably the most gut-wrenching and emotionally challenging piece for a homeschool parent to write. So I do recommend you give yourself some leeway in time. Uh, have some places where you keep post-it notes and you write down ideas that come to you. It's a little bit of a developing process, and I think it's very normal as the parent is creating these high school documents that they feel a little bit judged as well.
Mm.
Um, I had this vision of uh, the admissions office scrutinizing my own work a little bit, and it was hard to maintain a good emotional distance. But this was my kids' application. I was documenting in a narrative way what their experience had been. Um, I think it's normal that we, as homeschool parents, feel that our choices are also being weighed and measured as part of the admissions process.
Mm.
So just
Interesting.
realize it might not be something you crank out in an hour after dinner. It might take you some time to get it into the place you want it to be.
Yeah, I had not heard that before. So I included in my kids' packets reference letters, referral letters from, note from the community college professors who had some, more credibility than necessarily I did.
Mhm.
But they certainly didn't know my child the way I did. So I like the addition of something along those lines where the parent's writing something that can get to a lot of the heart of the child and things like that, in addition to potentially some outside reference letters.
I think they're both very important. I think the letters of recommendation from an outside perspective are essential for a homeschooler. Make sure you're not shorting that.
Mhm.
And that could mean that as you're weighing where they take classes junior year, that you want to make sure there is some outside point of view that they are going to be able to present later when they apply. But there's also, I think, space for what we are their counselor as a homeschool parent. We do have information about the stumbling blocks they've overcome,
Mhm.
about the effects of moving cross country or a death in the family or divorce, um, that their English teacher may not have insight into. So I recommend going ahead and providing the counselor recommendation. Do your best to show the student characteristics rather than just tell them. So one of the things I help parents do when they're working with me is, rather than say my kid is kind, try to think of an incident you can describe that shows that kindness or generosity towards other people in action. And I think that can be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I like the kind of what you're kind of describing, the academics, the course description, the how things were calculated and stuff, but then also the letters of reference, the school profile, the parent recommendation, and then the list of reading or extracurricular activities, just this whole thing. And one of the things that I do offer to homeschoolers is um, taking homeschooling parents from the younger grades, 7th, 8th, 9th, even 10th, kind of laying out their homeschool journey and setting that up. And then as a follow-on little mini course, the transcript and comprehensive student packet that does include all of that in terms of helping parents walk through that and creating that. So that is something that I did for my girls and did send that comprehensive student packet, which included all those things that we just talked about, except for that I didn't do the one from the parent. The whole thing was from the parent, but I did not do a separate recommendation from the parent. But that whole everything else, sent that to the colleges as a packet and even got feedback from the colleges about how they really, I mean, okay, this was 10 years ago, but the schools were just really happy to have that whole packet and see that holistic view of the student. It validated the student's academics and it validated the student themselves. It really helped the admissions team.
One thing that parents may find is really different from when they applied to college, or if they have a spread older kids and younger kids. something that is newish is how much more is done online in the application process. And one example of that is the Common Application, which is a unified portal that somewhere around 900 colleges in the US use. So it lets the student put in their individual information, their activities list, where they live, what their courses were. There's like a course section in there as well. And every college that uses Common App can download that same information. And then there is, in addition, college-specific sections where if there's a supplementary essay that only James Madison requires, then it's right there. And it might be different than the supplementary essay that Purdue requires.
Right.
For homeschool parents, there is a counselor section. So the student would invite you, and then you would create a counselor login, and that's where you would upload the school profile, the transcripts, the course descriptions, and the counselor recommendation. So you really are doing that same back end support that a school counselor at a public or private school would be.
Exactly. Which is why you want to have these individual things available and ready when it's time to go through that process. And you feel very confident. And this is one of the reasons why I walk parents through this from the early ages, just these little mini courses just to get them started, and then through the transcript and calculating GPAs and that kind of thing, because it puts you in a position where you are prepared, confident, and you, when you're going to the Common App, or whether it's a specific to the college, you just have those things ready to just upload.
And it's something that there's some stages to, it's getting all of the individual courses down. What were the course descriptions like? What was the grade? And then you make it look pretty.
Exactly.
So there is a little bit of sequencing to that. It's much easier to revise than sit down and write the whole thing from nothing. So
absolutely, which is again why I have this little level 1 class for 7th, 8th, 9th, and then even this level 2 class, which is transcripts and GPAs and how do you compile this comprehensive packet. You can take that as early as 6th, 7th, 8th grade if you want. You don't have the grades to actually start doing a transcript yet, but I give them a template to use, and so a lot of it's just plugging in. But if you start earlier, like you were saying, start as early as possible, 7th, 8th grade, where you've got courses that are high school courses, and start taking those course descriptions and getting that document of your course descriptions. I call it your program of studies, getting that document going. And then each semester or each year, you're just doing it. It's much easier than doing it all at the end.
And you may even find, or families may find, that there's instances well before senior year of high school where they are going to need to have a transcript. That could be competitive summer programs. I had one college that wanted, a community college that wanted to see a transcript for dual enrollment students. There's nothing worse than having your kid procrastinate applying something and look at you at, 5 o'clock. Oh, this says I need a transcript. Where do I get that from? Not that ever happened at my house.
Yeah. So is there anything that a homeschooling student can do to stand out in their application? I mean, we talked about are there extra requirements, but what can they do even on their own to stand out?
That's a great question. And the need for that is going to depend widely based on how selective the college they're applying to. So recognize that if a student is applying to a college that maybe accepts 10% of the students who apply, that the threshold for achievement is going to be very different than if they're applying to a school that is accepting 70, 80% of applicants. But as far as standing out, I think that a student, to be flippant, don't do the minimums. Don't just check the boxes, meet the minimum requirements, and draw a blank when you start filling out the activities record, or draw a blank when you're trying to think of who can write a letter of recommendation. So I like to describe this as activities that are impactful in college admissions tend to be things where the student has a real interest in an area, so much so that it's bubbling up out of them and their cup is running over, they can't help but tell you about the thing that they're doing. They're not just learning about it in one class, but they're stringing together a bunch of classes along a theme. They're doing activities that are related. They are reaching out to younger students, to older adults to help bring them into this thing they're interested in. So that could be a sport where they're not only competing, but they're also helping to coach summer camps for younger students in a developmental level, or they're starting to referee. Maybe they're doing student coaching interning. And so they're taking what they love to do and they're helping someone else embrace it as well. So I think one previous time that I was on with you, we talked about some specific activities I'd seen students do. And I wanted to throw out a few of those because I thought they might help people understand or do some brainstorming of their own. So some things that don't have to rely on a school structure. This could be Model United Nations, Science Olympiad, which by the way, I'll give a little plug for Science Olympiad. They have mostly gone online for the 2020-2021 season. So that could be a real option for students. Cyber Patriot is a cybersecurity competition program. They can do internships. That will maybe be a formal internship that a government agency or a company is promoting, or it might be approaching someone who's a friend of the family or someone who is in the community and saying, hey, I'm really interested in this thing. If I sweep, can you teach me something? How can I get to know more? It could be community volunteering. That could be everything from helping with the Friends of the Library, lots of environmental type of volunteering, trail clearance, uh, helping with removing invasive species, building projects at county or national parks. Foreign language learning and teaching can be one. That could be something where the student has a language that they've been learning, and then they turn around and they help to teach someone younger. It could be that they are working with a English language learning group and teaching English, and then also getting to practice the target language that they are studying. ASL is very popular amongst a lot of students, especially students who may have some difficulty with through dyslexia or dysgraphia that makes traditional world languages, spoken world languages, more challenging for them, but they may find that ASL fits them very well. Academic tutoring could be something. Volunteering in areas like food banks, food pantries. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about sports. So for homeschoolers, it's very easy to have the pessimistic glass half empty or glass all empty view of sports, where your local area or your state might not allow homeschoolers to participate at a varsity level within the high school sports structure. So things like football or basketball might not be very accessible. There are a lot of sports that are not tied to that high school team competition structure. So let me throw out a few that I've seen homeschoolers compete in very successfully. Sailing. A student I worked with not only sailed in high school, but went on to be a recruited sailor for her college. Martial arts, gymnastics, swimming, even high schools that have high school swim teams, many of those competitors may also be on USA Swimming club teams at the same time. Golf, tennis, canoeing, fencing, rock climbing, skiing, both downhill and cross country, BMX, hockey. These are all things that there's a lot of competition available, but they do not occur within that high school structure. So it's not something a homeschooler gets shut out of.
Yeah. But even in our homeschool area, not all areas may have this, but had homeschool football, homeschool, basketball, homeschool, soccer, and they did compete against private schools.
Mhm.
It wasn't
And
public.
I had one of my own kids was in a cross country team, and it was from a community league that had private schools and then multiple homeschool groups in it. Even that, there were occasionally some bumps along the way. And another option is something like doing local area cross country running, or AAU, I believe is the acronym for track.
Okay.
So there's a lot of programs that you can be in,
Or even start. You could
or
even start.
start. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it goes back to the I like the line from Field of Dreams, if you build it, they'll come. I think sometimes having the activity structure does require the family to say, okay, we're willing to put some support into this.
Hmm.
Sometimes some money, sometimes just the sweat equity and the willingness to be the adult who helps manage it.
Well, great. Okay. So any other thoughts before we just talk about how people might be able to get a hold of you if they want to get more information or find out how you might be able to help them?
I think the biggest takeaway, we've talked a lot, don't panic. That's really important. It can seem like an overwhelming amount of information, an overwhelming number of tasks, and um, it's achievable. Your kid can go to college. Your kid could apply to and be admitted to some selective colleges in many circumstances. The other thing I think is I really want to make sure that I mention is that success in your adult life is not tied to attending one of a very small number of colleges. So life is not I think your experience bears this out. Certainly, almost every adult I know, their progression from high school through college, through early adult, through late adult life was not the straight line progression. It looked a lot more like Billy from Family Circus trying to get from A to B through all of these disparate little areas.
Yeah.
Engagement in college is a better indicator of adult success than the ranking that the college has. So find ways of being engaged. Those items we talked about, how a high school student stands out in their applications, those are very similar to the ways that a college student gets engaged in activities, organizations, mentoring, projects, clubs, sports while they're in college. And so you don't wait for someone else to come and hand it to you and say, well, would you please be in my group? But you find ways of connecting yourself.
That's so important. And you mentioned this in our previous interview for the 8th to 12th graders. Just it's more important to really love the learning, love get involved and engage than necessarily, being the top student. And, there are most of the people who are going to be watching this are people who believe their children will be college bound.
Mhm.
But, we get a lot of questions about what if my child isn't going to be college bound? What are the opportunities there? So it's almost similar in terms of engage with life, right? Being
Yeah.
engaged with life, be passionate, engage. And, college is not the only option. This happens to be what we're talking about right now, but it's not the only option. And you even talked about internships and apprenticeships. And that's another option, that someone may go into an apprenticeship where they don't end up going into college. So although we're talking about college, I think even what you offer could lead a student to a place where they realize maybe college isn't for me.
I think that could be true. And I think it could be college, but not right now. It could be a gap year where the student is traveling or volunteering or working. It could be joining the military. One of the things I volunteer with is an organization called Service to School, and that is helping transitioning veterans with their college applications.
Hmm.
So it's someone who's spent between a handful to maybe a dozen years in the military and is now applying to in some cases, undergraduate for the first time, in some cases, transfer student status, or they're applying on for a master's degree if they've earned their college degree already.
Mhm.
But again, life's not a straight line. How many of us are in 2.0 or 3.0 of self-identity? And I think
Yeah.
that's a key thing that we also transmit to our kids, that um, find ways of leaving doors open and realize that you can keep learning through your adult life. You can become a professional with deep expertise in something that wasn't the route you started in high school.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so how can people get a hold of you to explore what they might be able to do together with you?
So I'd love to talk to anyone who thinks that they'd like to have some more help with this. The easiest way is to email me, and my email is lisa@admissionsdecrypted.com. If you want to learn more, but you aren't ready to start working personally with me, I recommend you follow my website, admissionsdecrypted.com. That's where I put original content that I write, a lot of the same type of things we've talked about, but also very college specific information, like what is rolling admissions? Should you apply early decision? What needs to go into an essay? What's a wide us essay? All of these things, my analysis of current trends. And then I have a Facebook page for Admissions Decrypted. And on the Facebook page, I do a lot more current events type things. So, new scholarship programs, promoting a particular project at one university as an example of, hey, there's a lot of really cool stuff out there.
Mhm.
Did you know that this exists? Have you ever heard of this thing? And it's to help people think of what might be possible.
Yeah. Well, I'll include all that contact information on the slide that will come out here at the end, as a way for people to get hold of you. Um,
Fantastic.
yeah, anything else that you want to talk about before we wrap up?
So actually, I did think of one more thing. I wanted to promote a podcast that is not my podcast, but it's called How I Built This.
Oh yeah.
And it's by Guy Raz. I listened to it on Spotify. I think he has an NPR show. I think he has a Facebook page. I really love this because he will interview people who own businesses. I've listened to one about power bikes. He had one from the woman who invented Spanx. I listened to one from some restaurateurs. The Kiwi Crate people was one I listened to recently. It's just really fascinating to hear where people got their ideas from and what their path looked like. And I think this can be really helpful for a student to see, hey, maybe electrifying my scooter in 20 years will result in my owning the biggest electric bike company in the entire US. But it's not going to be a straight line path.
Right.
It's going to have a pathway through electric skateboards and then creating your own company. And they come from China and they have parts on them that don't work. And we spend all our evenings fixing them. Life's not a straight line. Get interested in what people do and how they got there. That can provide some analogs for things you might be interested in doing and pathways that might help you get there.
Yeah.
Uh,
My daughter loves that. She's 24. She's the one that even told me about it. Just loves that
It's one of my
podcast.
walking podcasts. I get exposed to things I have never heard of before, and then I start seeing them everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, but what you're saying too brings up one last point that I want to make. And I have another interview that I did with a man named Donnie Fitzpatrick that I can get people access to. But it's about also allowing your child the opportunity to figure out who they are and what they're about and what they are interested in, and allowing them to explore. Yes, they have to do the academics, but instead of trying to fit them into a box necessarily, just giving them the freedom and some time to explore and figure things out so that they, like you're saying, that So we're not forcing the straight line on them
Mhm.
when, had they been given the chance, they might have taken a different path. So it's a fine line for parents, right? To know how much to force the whatever and how much freedom to give, but it's an important thing to consider.
And I think what goes along with that is you need to let the kid have the opportunity to fail.
Mhm.
Often the process of developing a skill or um, working on a project they're trying to refine, there's a lot of didn't work along the way.
Yep.
Didn't I tried to learn pole vaulting, didn't work. I need to change my form. Didn't break that board in martial arts. Whatever the thing is, um, and also give your kid the opportunity to quit, to say this thing isn't meeting my needs anymore. For my family, that was for one kid Latin, but it might be this sport isn't serving my needs anymore. It might be this musical instrument isn't serving my needs anymore. This other thing is the direction I want to go. And there's a tension between that and what we talked about at the beginning of our time together about trying to hold doors open. You can be trying so hard to hold every door open that you don't provide the room for your kid to walk through any of them.
Mm.
I think that's individual, family to family, and even kid to kid. I have 3 sons, and their goals, none of them were identical, and their paths, none of them were identical.
Right.
They're all very intrinsically them.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much for this rich discussion. I
Thank you
really enjoyed
for
it
having me.
personally.
It's been really great. Awesome. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.